Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Princeton Public Library's virtual home here on Crowdcast. I'm so pleased to have such a great crowd with us tonight for our art talk by Liz Cutler. We have a lot of exciting events coming up this month on Crowdcast, and I encourage you to visit our page to see what other types of events. We have some author events, as well as a talk tomorrow night by High Tops. And we have a really interesting event at the end of the month. It's going to be a hybrid event, both here on Crowdcast and in our community room, discussing the upcoming play at McCarter on what the Constitution means to me. It's like a community book club discussion, both in person and hybrid. I'm Janie Herman, and I am the Adult Programming Manager at Princeton Public Library. And it's my great joy tonight to introduce the main speaker. I'm just giving a few minutes for everybody to log on. And that was my little tap dance show to do that. And we're getting a nice crowd gathered here. So welcome. I think we're in for a treat tonight. So now I'm going to introduce our speaker, a person who I feel probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but nonetheless, the library is just feeling so fortunate to have the art show of Looking Micro, Seeing Macro, which is pressed flower art by Liz Cutler, hanging in our reading room at this time, and it'll be up until January 3rd. So if you live in the area, I encourage you to stop by and take a look. If you don't, I've put a link there. You can just get it anytime. It says Liz's Art on Flickr, which does show all of the pieces that are on display on Flickr. And that way, if you do want to purchase a print from Liz, you can see what's out there and make arrangements with Liz to purchase some of the prints. And Liz is kindly going to donate a portion of the proceeds to the library, and we appreciate that. So Liz has been a part of the upper school English faculty at the Princeton Day School since 1985, and she is also their sustainability coordinator since 2009. She's very active in a consortium of nonprofits organizing action on sustainability in schools, OASIS. She is one of the founding directors. And she has also been worked with Sustainable Princeton and been an important member here at the library of our Princeton Environmental Film Festival Committee. She has a great body of work within her teaching and sustainability career. And though it was during the pandemic that she found a new way to express her love of nature. She has no art training at all. In fact, this is her first journey into the artistic world. But as many have said, upon viewing the exhibit, you could never tell that this was her first journey. She started collecting, pressing, and arranging during walks near her home, through the local woods, her friends' gardens, and meadows throughout the pandemic and her son's serious illness. She calls these pieces her meditation. And so I'm going to welcome Liz to the screen, and she is going to walk us through some of her pieces. Hi, Liz, welcome, and tell us about how they came about and her journey and her process and everything else. So I'm going to make myself disappear, and I'll be bringing up Liz's slides. So Liz, you can just take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. You're all so kind and sweet to be here. I'm sure you have other things you'd rather be doing, but I'm grateful for the support on this journey that I'm on. Who knew that at my age, you could find something inside yourself that you didn't even know existed? I mean, that must be true for all of us, right? We must all have things inside us that, if we have the time and space, could appear almost like magic. So I'll tell you how it all started. It's a funny story. Oh, so don't show that quite yet, if you don't mind, Janie. So my dear friends Christina and Michael, who live down the block from us, have a beautiful garden. They're amazing gardeners, and they have a pool in their backyard. And they were kind enough to allow us their first summer to use the pool. Isaac, my son, and I spent a lot of time in the summer in their pool. And it was after he had been quite ill. And so it was a perfect opportunity for him to recover, to get some strength back. And I wanted to say thank you. And they don't need anything. There's nothing I could buy for them or make for them that would really mean anything. So surreptitiously, when they weren't around, I would nip little bits and pieces of flowers and things from their garden and press them. I didn't really know anything about pressing, but I thought I'll make a little, I don't know, a little picture so they can remember what their garden looked like in the summer. So now, Janie, you can show that first piece. So this is the first piece that I made, and I made it for them. Janie. Well, I don't know about the slides. Janie, there you go. Awesome. Thanks. So So I just put them down on paper, and now when I look at it, I think to myself, oh my God, 6-year-old could do that, which is true. A 6-year-old could do that. And what I learned in doing that is that you can really ruin stuff if you don't know how to press. And I was doing what, I don't know, I learned when I was in Girl Scouts, which is you take a flower or something and you put it inside an old phone book or between two pieces of paper underneath something heavy, and you wait till it's dry. Well, that's fine and dandy, except half the time they rot or get moldy. And so that, this is sort of what was left of what I was able to press from their garden. So Isaac got sick. Many of you know that, my son. And I was on sabbatical, thank goodness. And my life got very small. And all I could really do was take walks around the block and through the DNR Greenway Park, and maybe sometimes near mountain lakes, occasionally in the woods. And mostly for my own sanity, I would just pick things that I thought were beautiful, because nature has always given me a sense of peace. And, while I am Jewish and did grow up going to synagogue, I've learned over time that really nature is my spiritual center. It's where I feel closest to whatever power this universe has. And I've spent my professional life, as you know, trying to wake people up to being connected and saving it. But what I learned as I started to pick things was that I learned to look micro in a way that I never had before. So next slide, please. And I would see things that I hadn't seen or that I hadn't noticed. So for example, the smoke bush that are the leaves in the center of this piece have this amazing shape that I think I'd never really paid attention to. And I thought, well, there's such a beautiful gold color. You can't really tell from the digital version. What would they look like on black? So the reason I began to do this, to actually put things down like this, had to do with my friend Sandy, who got COVID, unfortunately. And we were exposed. Isaac was mostly exposed to her. And because my husband and older sons were very protective of me, they said I had to go and be in my bedroom for 10 days. So I was banished to the bedroom upstairs for 10 days. And what was I going to do with myself for 10 days? I mean, how much YouTube can you watch or books to read? And so I began to put these things down on paper, the paper that I had, because I'd bought it not knowing if I wanted white or black for my present to Christina and Michael. And so I spent 10 days up there. Next slide, please. With these leaves, and the ginkgo leaves, of course, in the center. And these little tiny yellow ones that accent the piece are called Golden Alexander. And I've seen them before, but I never knew what they were. They are spring ephemerals, and I found them in the woods behind my house in the spring. And all of a sudden, I began to look at the world in a really different way, to see color and shape, to know when things came out, which I hadn't really paid attention to, even though I've sort of been a self-taught naturalist since the time I was about 15. I never dialed in so closely. Next slide, please. So these are all oak leaf hydrangeas. They're all from the same plant, and they're from the shopping center. They're right behind McCaffrey's. So next time you go to McCaffrey's, if you're local, which is our local grocery store, you'll see them there. And right now, that incredible pink color that's on the right-hand side is out showing itself. But earlier in the season, the other colors are there. So what I love about pieces like this is that they show a plant all along its journey. And these colors were much more vibrant when I first made this piece. And I'm learning that these pieces evolve, that like us, they're living things. And while I've dried them, they're still alive. And so they change color and they change feel. And one of the joys has been to watch the pieces change rather than to think of it as, oh, they fade and I'm losing the color, rather to think each week or each month, the pieces are slightly different. And so one of the reasons that I was selling prints was because I was nervous that people would, buy an original and find that 6 months from now, it doesn't look the same as when they bought it. I think that's a cool, wonderful, amazing thing to be part of a transformation. But I was afraid that other people wouldn't. So I've taken photographs of them, or actually I've had them photographed at a professional photographer so that people could have the original colors. Next slide, please. So then I thought, well, what if I started to pick things that weren't leaves and weren't flowers? The Nishiki willows, which are the long reddish colored narrow things, and there are 3 of them. That was the anchor for the piece. And I began to realize that as I was working, I would have to find some place to begin. And I began with those 3 Nishiki willows, and they were so vertical and so narrow. I began to add on pieces that were vertical and narrow. And then I thought, well, feathers are vertical and narrow, and I've always collected feathers. I've always been a collector of things, as some of you know, rocks and nests after the bees leave, the wasps leave, and feathers and anything really that I can find. My house is full of that stuff hanging around. And so I was working on this, and it was going very well. And then it all looked kind of the same. So I thought, all right, well, I guess I need some pieces to anchor the 2 sides that are wider. And so I'm beginning to learn. I'm sort of teaching myself about composition because I don't have any training. And it became really what feels right. What I loved about this piece was the lack of color. And if you see it in person, it's got a little more color than it does here, but it was really about variety of shades of green and brown, and not about the drama of a bright purple flower, but really more the soft hues of what a meadow might look like. And these are mostly from the DNR Greenway, and the Nishiki willows are from my friend Christina and Michael. Next slide, please. So I began to get adventurous, and I thought, well, what if I began to work big? So I started small, 8.5 by 11, and that became 9 by 12, which became 11 by 14, which became 11 by 17, which became this piece, which was 18 by 24. And at first, just having a big page like that I looked at that huge piece of paper and thought, oh my goodness, how can I possibly fill it? But the pieces themselves are big. So if you look on the left-hand side, there's that wonderful silver grass that is the anchor, that was the anchor for this piece, along with the hydrangea on the right. And they're huge. So once I realized I could work big, that became my favorite size, to just have the room for a piece to breathe and to be able to put in whatever I wanted and not feel constrained by having a tiny piece of paper. On the other hand, next slide, please. This piece is I call it spring ephemerals. I thought, well, what if I worked on a piece that was all from one season? So these are all things that come up and disappear, and they disappear fast, and you have to be out all the time to catch them. And so what I love about spring ephemerals is that they reward looking closely, and they reward getting off the beaten track, because they're not all from the woods. So for example, the azalea that's in the bottom, that little azalea bud, the purple one, and the lamb's ear on the right and on the left. I don't know how to, I'm afraid if I make the bing go away, then you won't hear anything. I won't hear my speaking. So some of them are from gardens, but most of them literally I picked out of my yard or the woods behind my house. And so they kind of go together. They're like a family because they were all sort of born at the same time, which I really love. So this piece is not 18 by 24. It's smaller because the pieces themselves were smaller. And I thought on an 18 by 24, they'll get lost. So I think this one's 11 by 17. So next slide, please. So I'm learning as I'm going, and I'll talk about about pressing at the end in case anybody wants to get in on the game. So this piece was my first big piece on black. And I did the whole piece on white. And I loved it. But then I thought, well, gee, I wonder what it would look like on black. So I thought, well, how do I move it from one side to the other? So I thought, aha, I'm going to start taking pictures with my phone. And what I began to do was realize that my phone was a really important part of the process, because I could do draft after draft after draft. And some of these, like this piece, had 10, 11, 12 drafts. And I could take a picture and then put it up on my computer and then work off the computer to move it to the black paper. And as I did, things got tweaked and I realized, okay, aha, I get it. I can draft and move as I go along by using my phone to capture earlier images so I could go back. And because, once you've done another draft, it's like, well, where did I put this last time? So that's been a really helpful part of the process. This piece started with these wonderful blue billow hydrangeas, which there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see them. They're the ones that with the blue centers and the light blue on the outside. And they were so spectacular. My friend Christina, from whose garden I pilfered this with her permission, of course. I try not to pilfer from, well, not try. I don't pilfer from people's gardens without asking. But Christina's been very kind to let me take things. And she calls this sprezzatura, I think is the word, which means sort of explosion, right? So I put those 5 pieces down. And then I thought, okay, I want everything on this page to explode off the page. And so I thought, well, what if I begin to, because I'd been working just meadow or just leaves or just flowers. I was like, what if I combine them? What if I use grasses? And so you can see there are some grasses like on the lower left-hand corner. There's some things from meadows, like you'll see the Queen Anne's lace on the right-hand side and the lower left bottom. And then there are things from people's gardens that are very fussy. But then there's wild geranium, and there's things that I, found by the side of the road. So I thought, what if I put those all together? Would that still work? Would it have an identity, a kind of feeling of connectedness? And I think it's the black that actually pulls the piece together, because it makes you feel like you're walking in somebody's summer garden at night, which is what I loved about it being on black. So next slide, please. So I thought, okay, what would it look like if I were walking not in a summer garden at night, but in the meadow at night? So all of these are grasses that I found in the meadow, except that very weird hydrangea with the white leaves. They're actually connected. That circular piece is one piece. And I clipped that from the wall that is at the corner of Washington Road and Nassau Street. It's the university building that's kitty corner from the Garden Theater. I happened to be walking by, and they were it's a vine, sort of, Christina knows the name, I've forgotten, that grows up that side of that wall. So I don't go anywhere anymore without a little tiny backpack, a string backpack that has a scissors and a notebook, so I can press immediately. The faster you press, the better they look. So I clipped that, and it was such a strange piece, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then I thought, the white is going to feel like little moons at night. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start with these big grasses. So you'll see there's 1, 2, 3 big zebra grasses that anchor this piece. The one that's in the middle, and then the upside down one on the right, and the one on the left that's facing up. And those were the anchors for this piece. And then I put in that weird moon shape, because it just felt like night to me. And some of these other interesting grasses, like the one on the left that with the tall green stem and the almost the explosion out the side, and the one that's right in the middle, those came from I was walking in a meadow near an arboretum, Morris Arboretum. They have a meadow on the backside, and I do admit actually to clipping 3 little pieces from the Morris Arboretum, but please don't tell them that I said that. It wasn't anything cultivated, so I didn't feel too bad about it. What else about this piece? Oh, so in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see mouse oats. So I cut those from a crack in the sidewalk in Washington, D.C. in the spring. I just was walking along, and there they were in the sidewalk, and I thought, well, those are cool. And you'll see that many of the pieces of the later pieces have on the right-hand side a cicada wing. And I found this summer, with all the bazillions of cicadas in my driveway, that there was a glimmer and a glitter to their wings that I thought, this is fantastic. I have to use these. And then I thought, well, that could be my signature. I could put that in every piece. So much to most people's horror, after they were dead, I did not pull the wings off the live ones, I have to say. I would pull the wings off the dead ones and leave them out in the sun so that they would dry and not be smelly. And when I told my sister-in-law, she said, oh, you are a freak. But they're so beautiful. I have hundreds of them in a box. So I don't know how long they'll be my signature. I'll use them up, and 17 years from now, if I'm still alive, I can get more. So next slide, please. So one of the things that I noticed is that leaves that are chewed are often thought of as ugly or imperfect. But if you look at them closely, they're fantastically beautiful. I mean, really look at each one of those leaves. It's almost like like some insect was dancing through the leaf. And I guess the reason I wanted to do this piece is because I thought to myself, not only do we not look at nature because we just don't see it, we walk past it, but we expect everything to be perfect. I mean, 40% of the food in this country is thrown away. And most of it is thrown away from farmers who know they can't sell an apple with a little boop on it, or an orange that has a black spot. People won't buy it, which is absurd to me. And when I look at these leaves, what I wanted to say is everything in nature is beautiful, even the things that most people would pass by and say they were damaged. If you look at that one in the upper left-hand corner that comes to a kind of a narrow, it's not a heart shape, but just to the left of the triangle. The triangle is called a mile a minute because it's a weed and it grows a mile a minute, but I love the triangle shape. Look at the intricacy of that. It's just, they're like lace. They're like lace. We try to make things that look like this, and yet in nature, we think of them as ugly. So anyway, that's what this piece was about for me. So next one, please. So I thought I would show my process. So here's one piece where I show you the drafts. These are called dinner plate hibiscus. And once again, they're from my friend Christine and Michael's garden. And only one a day emerge. I mean, many are on the plant, but they only live for a single day, and then they fall off. So that's already kind of a cool metaphor. And so you have to pick them early in the morning before they're gone. So I pick them early, and it's pretty hard to dry. I mean, they're huge. They really are like the size of dinner plates. These are 18 by 24. And I started by putting one on. So the bottom one was the first one. And I thought, well, that doesn't look right. Those look like it's too big, and everything else next to it is too small. So what if I did 2? So I took the whole thing apart and I put 2 in, which is the upper left corner. And then I thought, well, that also looks weird. It looks like, I don't know, some monster came and stepped on the plant, on the piece, on all those beautiful little flowers. So I thought, all right, what if I use it as wallpaper? So the one in the upper right-hand corner was where there are 10 other drafts of this, but this sort of gives you a sense of the process. And I thought, well, what if I layer the smaller flowers on top so that the bigger flowers don't take over the piece, and yet their grandeur isn't lost? And then you really have a sense of what a garden is like. It's this melange of small and large, vertical and circular, and just a single petal. So like in the upper right-hand corner, there's the single Rose of Sharon petal. And in the upper left-hand corner, there's one Cleome blossom or one rose petal in the bottom center. And some of the pieces on here are spectacular. If you saw it big, you would say, wow, they're so beautiful. But when you layer them on top of the big one, they kind of, each one stops being a show off. And I like that about this piece. So next slide, please. All right, so I thought I would talk a little bit about collecting. So I collect everything. I have a box under my desk with little pieces of, I don't know, grapevine and little pods that come off trees, and little pieces of moss or I don't, because I don't know what I'm going to use. So I've got feathers. I just keep everything. So next slide, please. So if you want to really get into this, here's the paper that you use. So I found out there's something called, ready for this? This will blow your mind. The Worldwide Flower Pressers Guild. I kid you not. There are hundreds and hundreds of flower pressers who belong to this guild. And I've learned a ton of them from them. They do something quite different. Most of them many of them are from China. I'd say at least half of the members or more are from China. And they use the flowers as paint. And they make landscapes or portraits or paintings with you cutting up the flowers to use as color. So they actually color the flowers. So I don't color the flowers, which means my flowers are not going to retain their color as vibrantly. But I did learn from them that the best way to press is to use what's called desiccant paper. And you can buy it on the internet. And it's infused with a silica gel. So instead of taking 6 weeks to dry and my having to sit for an hour every night and take out the paper that got moist and put in dry paper, which was kind of a meditation, but also kind of a pain in the neck, I can dry these in 3 days or even 2 days, depending on what it is or how wet the flower is, using this desiccant board. And it's fantastic. Some people press in with what's called a microfleur, and they do it in the microwave. But as a sustainability coordinator, I can't justify the use of the energy. And frankly, I like the slow, old-fashioned way. I put everything underneath. Once you've well, go on to the next slide, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I bought this wonderful acid-free tissue paper. So you have to activate these desiccant boards. After each use, I put them in the oven for 5 minutes, laid out, and they dry out again, and then I store them in plastic. So the left-hand side of the desiccant paper, those have been activated, and I want to keep the air out of those. And then on the right are pieces of acid-free tissue that I put in between so that I don't wreck the desiccant board by having a flower leaf color behind. And I store those obviously in a bag as well. Next slide. So this is a side view of kind of the sandwich that you make. So I might do many layers. I'll do, piece of cardboard, tissue, leaves or flowers, tissue, desiccant paper, tissue, more flowers, tissue, desiccant paper, until I have a kind of a lasagna. And then I put it in a plastic bag. Next slide, please. And I use my son's old textbooks. And I don't think they're on this, so I can say aloud that I think this is the best use, the pre-calculus most use that the calculus textbook ever got. And I put them underneath, and they're sitting on my dining room floor. So it's not really a very sophisticated system, but it seems to work for me. And then after 3 days, I'll take them off, pull them out of the bag. Next slide, please. And I store them with white paper behind so I can see the color well. And I have a desk now in my closet, which is where I work, and I store them by type. So there's a bag of ginkgo leaves, for example. Next slide. And then I have a drawer full of grasses that are in plastic bags of all different kinds. Next slide. And then when I work, I say to myself, well, where do I want to begin? Do I want it to be on with flower? I really don't know where I start. It's not like I have a big plan in mind. Occasionally I do, but mostly I just spread them out on the floor and say, oh, that's gorgeous. I'll start with that. And that'll be my anchor. And I'll work outward from there. Next slide, please. Okay, Sam and David are on this call. Sorry, guys, about the textbook comment. But it's true. Anyway, so you can see in the drawers at the top, there are all the cicada wings. There's money plant. The next drawer down are feathers. The next drawer down are little pieces of hard fungus, which I don't know, I haven't used yet, but maybe I could, so I collect it. Why not? Next slide, please. So here are the tools that I use in case you want to do this. I buy a kind of acid-free glue that's for sale in art stores, and the next slide will show you exactly what it is, so you can write down the name if you want. And I have a very sharp cutting tool and my tweezers, and I apply. So at first I would put the glue on a little piece of cardstock, and with toothpicks I would apply it to the back of the leaf. And I've learned the hard way lots of I've wrecked lots of things, right? So for example, if you put too much glue on something that's very delicate, like a Rose of Sharon petal, the petal will essentially collapse under the weight of the glue. So using the toothpicks is great, but sometimes I'll make a mistake. Having Q-tips there is great to take things off. And then I found this wonderful little white jar, which you can see on the left, with a very, very thin nozzle. So I load that up with glue, and then I can put little tiny, I can sort of get rid of the toothpicks, which was nice. I have a friend in the art department at PDS where I work who was able to make me some metal slugs, which I use as a template for cutting out the squares in the leaves. And I have a 1 inch, a 1.5 inch, and a 2 inch. And I cut around those with the X-Acto knife. So next slide. So here's the glue. It's made by Linco. I like it a lot. There are lots of different glues out there, and I've tried a couple of others. I like this the best. It dries clear and doesn't dry too quickly. Once you put things down, it's pretty hard to pick up. There are some glues that you don't take as long to pick up, but I don't know. They left more goo behind, and I didn't like them as much. So this is the one that I've decided on. And people say, well, why don't you spray to keep the color? And all the people in the Worldwide Flower Pressers Guild, none of them spray. But I thought, okay, so I bought 2 sprays, and I'm going to experiment. But I have a feeling that they're going to change the way the pieces look, make them shiny. Even the matte ones, I think, are going to, you'll be able to see the film on top. I don't know. I'll let you know. You'll see how it progresses. So next slide, please. So this is the piece I'm working on now. And I started on the left, and I really was sure that's what I wanted. And when I was done, I thought it looked like a bunch of cow teats. So sorry, I thought all those little sharp tops and bottoms, these are all Rose of Sharon petals, which I think are just stunningly beautiful. But I thought it was really ugly, so I took everything off, and I started again and said, okay, well, what if I hide most of the connector points and just had a few? So you can see that middle piece. I'm sort of working it out, and then on the right, I didn't have room for all of the slides. I've got about 10 other iterations. I thought, well, what if I start adding some other colors that are related, and the shapes are related, but they're not, they're from different plants. So there's zinnias. So the zinnia petals are the really narrow ones. And then obviously those are rose petals. And then you'll see there's some wild geranium, purple, dark purple ones that I thought might be nice accents. So I'm still working on this one. I don't know if I like it or not. It's on white. It looks like it's on blue, but it's not really, just my cell phone. So that's all the slides that I have, and it's evolving. And I guess I would say the learnings for me, there's so many learnings here. The first one is that I've always thought myself to be the most unartistic person you could possibly meet. And I always said that to my students. I would draw stick figures on the board and I would have to label them, boy, girl, or whatever. You could just, I think I'm terribly not musical as well. So this was a surprise and a delight, and it brings me joy in a way that I can't explain. It's a meditation, really. It's very quiet work, and it's alone work, and it's just me and myself. And those of you who know my life, with my son and my work, I don't have much Liz time, and this is just for me. And it's been a gift. The other thing is, I'm seeing nature in a way I've never seen it. And I've looked closely at nature and taught about it my whole life. And I realize as I'm making these pieces that someone said to me, and I thought this was interesting, forget who said it, it's probably one of you, said, this is the physical or creative manifestation of what you've been trying to do professionally since the very beginning, which is to get people to pay attention, to see that nature is interconnected, to see that it's stunningly beautiful and worth saving. And we walk by it every single day and don't notice it. And so we don't value it. We're willing to use it as a commodity and not think of it as part of our universe or a sibling, which I think it is really. And we don't treat it like a sibling. We treat it like a resource we can use and abuse. So there's lots of learning here for me. I mean, I knew those things because I teach them, but it's visceral now for me in my heart in a different way. And I want to share it with people. A friend of mine, I don't know if she's on this call, suggested I start a wallpaper and a fabric company and call it Biophilia, and so that people can live with nature in their houses. And of course, people do have lots of pictures of nature in their houses, but there's this wonderful study that was done in hospitals about people healing faster if they had a window that looked out on nature, or even if they had a picture in their hospital room that had nature in it, so a landscape or something. And they did amazing studies where people had the exact same surgeries with the exact same problems, and all of the ones who had nature in their rooms were healthier and healed faster. And so, yeah, there it is. It's been a healing for me for sure. So anyway, that's all I have to say. I mean, English teachers, we could blah, blah on forever. But I'll be quiet and take questions or whatever.
Yeah. So we do have some questions, Liz. That was such a fascinating look into the process. I've been looking at your artwork now for about a month on the walls at PPL, just over a month now. And, getting to learn more about your thoughts and your process is such a gift. And there's so many people on here that have been appreciative of it. Someone asked if this would be recorded, and yes, it has been recorded. You'll be able to come back right on here on Crowdcast within about 5 minutes of us finishing, and you will get to see it right away. And it'll stay here on our Crowdcast channel at this URL. And so yes, it'll be recorded, and I will share that. Liz can send the link around and share.
Okay.
So this question, Helen Taylor, about how do you apply these delicate pressed flowers to the paper? So you were talking about the glue, and is there different ways that people do it than using glue? Have you experimented with that?
No, everybody uses glue. Everybody uses glue. Some people use a paintbrush. I haven't used a paintbrush. I know that it's popular. I like the toothpick process because I can really control where I put it. And on those things that are delicate, the more glue you put, the harder it is. Because let's say I'm working on a board and I've put a lot of glue on. When I lift it up, the weight of the glue actually might make the flower collapse. And then I work with tweezers to put it on. This is the moment where you want to be an octopus and have more than two hands so that you can, unfold the pieces that get folded in. But I liked using the toothpick. I think that really works well for me anyway.
Do flower pressers who work ever have like an assistant helping them so that they do have one more?
Not that I know of. It's a very, it's a very old-fashioned crowd. And people don't do this profession. I mean, yes, there are. I mean, people do sell their work for sure, but I don't think anybody's making a living off of this.
So this question is about the size. Are you working mostly now in the larger sizes? Are you going to go back to doing smaller ones like 8 by 10? Or I guess I'm thinking
piece.
note card size so that they can be.
So
but I guess anything that you've done larger could be photographed and shrunk down into note cards.
Right. Anything can be made into note cards. I think the joy of working big outweighs anything, because it really doesn't matter what size you work. Anything can become a photograph. And it depends on what I'm doing though. So I've been literally cutting the hearts out of leaves, the centers out of leaves for the last couple of weeks. When I'm hanging out with Isaac and he's watching a Disney movie or something. And I have a piece forming in the back of my brain that's super big with all of these cut squares. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but I think it's going to be big. Even though all my cut squares in the past have been small, I think it could be very interesting, big. So I'm evolving. The pieces are evolving and I'm evolving.
That's great. And my question, so are you going to continue? I guess you answered that sort of, your pieces are evolving. Do you see taking this to bigger venues, or this is going to be maintained as a personal passion, a side hobby, an Etsy shop?
Wow.
What's the future? Or have you had a chance to think that far ahead?
I work every day, all day. So I don't have, since I went back to work in September, I've made 2 pieces. And it's already mid-November, so I can't churn, you can't churn them out.
Right.
And so I think what I will do when I retire is make a lot of these. And maybe over Christmas break, I will have time to make more. But it will be always in my future. I'm sure that this will be part of my life forever.
Yes.
And who knows, maybe I'll become an opera singer next.
Life goals. Well, you did answer. There was another question in there about the process of pressing flowers, but you did answer that. Especially, I was very fascinated to learn about the desiccated paper and that process. And
Desiccant paper, not desiccated.
Oh, desiccant. I'm sorry, desiccant.
And
so that sounds like, but you can reuse that over and over again.
Over and over. I've used them hundreds of times. So
that's just like a sustainability coordinator's dream, right?
Totally. So what I was using is the backside of my husband's many physics papers from his profession. He had boxes and boxes and boxes of papers, the front side of which make no sense to me at all. But the back sides are white. So that was great, but it's a lot more work and they don't come out as well. And you really do have to, if you want to press that old fashioned way. And a lot of people use those screw presses. And that's where I started with ones actually that my sons made in summer camp when they were, I don't know, Sam and David, how old were you when you made those? Like 10? But the problem is every time you want to check them to see how they're doing, you have to unscrew all 4 corners. And it was too much of a bother. So it was just easier to pile the textbooks on top.
Yes, Sam and David are here online with us. And I'm not sure because you were in the middle of talking, the comments were flying by. And when you talked about their use of the calculus books, they were in there agreeing that, yes, that was
David actually majored in physics, so they really did use these books. But
They
anyway,
were joking with you.
I know, I was joking. But Digging Dog Day Camp, which is where they went as children, they made these flower presses. And I thought, oh, I already have flower presses. Great. But they were A, annoying because they took so much time to unscrew. And B, the papers really do absorb the moisture from the flower. And you'd be surprised how much moisture is in these plants. And so every day they would be wet, and transferring them, taking them off the damp paper and putting them on the dry paper. I can't tell you how many I tore or wrecked or broke, or then I'd be like, oh no, don't pull it off. And so I just put it right back in, and then it would mold. So, that desiccant paper is magic. So if you're going to do this,
And Jill wanted to know if you've made anything out of acorns or pine cones or even shells or stones. So is it possible to do anything else from nature, like even bark, or is that two-dimensional? Or
it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So you could make a collage with all kinds of things that are 3D. It's not what I want to be doing. So I try to collect things that are either fairly flat or can be flattened. I do collect shells and rocks, and I have all those things, but I don't think they fit quite as well. I think you wind up looking like a third grade project, if you put too much stuff in. But maybe I'm wrong, well, you would have to see, I suppose. So, I think everybody does their thing. I mean, acorns, you can't press those. And the other thing I've learned, which is really interesting, is the ecosystem of a flower. You cannot believe what is living inside a flower. How many bugs? I mean, and the bugs are so small. I mean, they're almost infinitesimally small. And I'll press them, and all of a sudden, like 12 of these bugs that I didn't even see will come running out of the flower all over my desiccant paper. And it's like, no, go away, go, shoot. And recently I was making a piece from flowers that had been in a bag for gotta be 4 months. Oh, it was these Rose of Sharon flowers. And out came a little bug, and I thought, what are you doing in there? Like, how are you surviving? And I'm like, oh, he's eating my flowers. So who knows what will happen to the pieces that I've made? Maybe they'll all get eaten from the inside, and there'll be nothing left. That'll be an interesting evolution.
Yeah. So many questions coming in about, we had a question about the bugs in your work. I guess you've had bugs flying out of your work. And then, I'm sorry.
Speaking of other living creatures. No, I like to collect wings. I've always collected wings. So I have, what's around now, which are the spotted lanternflies, have beautiful wings. So when I see those, first I kill them, and then, because they're invasive, and then I collect their wings. But I don't use other bugs. I like things that are little less red. Not my dog. Your dog.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's my teenage son coming home and my dog going nuts. Okay. This is the joys of doing virtual programs as a librarian, is that you never know what's going to happen. And I think we all are getting used to this. This has been an absolutely fabulous talk, Liz. I really want to thank you. We have comments here about poor David Lamont's going to be in trouble because he forgot to put the dinner in the oven at 7:15 because he got so engrossed in your talk.
Sorry,
so David, we're so sorry. And Pam Flory wants to see dancing insect leaves on black. She thinks it would be dramatic. Ooh, I agree. And thanks for sharing, and you're passionate. Yeah. So I hope you have time to read these comments here, Liz. They're a testament to your talk and how wonderful it was, and to your work, and how much we're all enjoying it. And as I said, this will be recorded. It will be up here for a replay on Crowdcast literally within 5 to 10 minutes. That's one of the nice things about Crowdcast, is it automatically makes the replay ready as soon as you're finished, and so we can share this again. And again, I encourage you to come by. These are on display in our reading room on the second floor. There's another display there as well in our technology center called Love Thy Nature. The two exhibits tied together by another local artist, Jamie Danielle Wiener, and so you can stop in and see her work as well. We change our artwork every couple of months at the library. It's always an adventure. We try to keep it local and try to keep it different each time. And if you like hanging out with us here on Crowdcast, it's a triple header for us this week. Tomorrow night we have High Tops here to talk about sexual orientation and gender identity terms and the new language surrounding that. High Tops is a local organization, for those of you who are unaware, that support our LGBTQ youth. And then on Wednesday we have an author talk about the daughters that were at Yalta with their famous fathers, the Daughters of Yalta. And so always something happening here at the library. And Liz, thank you for your support over the years of the library through the Princeton Environmental Film Festival, and now by hanging your work in our reading room. And so...
Can I say one last thing before we go?
Yes, one last thing. So I'm going to say, do you have closing comments? And then we're going to say goodnight.
So my closing comment is, I know many of you who are on this call, and this has been one of the hardest 18 months of my life, not having to do with COVID, but having to do with the illness of my son. And your support, and those of you who have gardens, I know there's some of you on here whose gardens I have raided. I'm so grateful for that. Colleen, you're on here. Thank you for that. And somebody asked me, would I teach a course on how to do this? Which is just, I sort of feel like a fraud because I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I'm just learning as I go. But the Princeton Adult School asked me if I would teach a course on it. So if you think that might be something that people would be interested in, it would be cool to know, because maybe I'll do that after I retire as well. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it.
Okay, so thank you, Liz. We're gonna say goodnight. And to me, this is always the awkward part where Liz and I wave, and I feel like we're in community and we're going to disappear. But I said, within 5 minutes, you can watch this talk all over again. So thank you and good night. And we'll see everybody at the library.